Welcome to the Skissers of Heart channel, and invite you to watch our new video story. Black Lake Stop. The driver's stern voice rang out from the tram. Maria opened her eyes. Lost in thought, she hadn't even noticed she'd passed her city stop. But hearing the screeching of the tram's wheels, she quickly decided she'd get off here. Apparently, fate itself was giving her a clue as to what to do next. This was a rather strange stop. It was located far outside the city. Long ago, workers would get off here, hurrying to a small bearing factory located to the right of the tram tracks. But almost 30 years after the factory closed, the stop remains. The path to the factory has become completely overgrown. However, on the other side of the tram tracks, a barely noticeable path remains, leading to the Black Lake. Only a few brave souls and reckless adventurers who wanted to tickle their nerves walked along it. No one could explain what was happening in the mysterious waters of this small forest pond. The water was crystal clear. The sandy bottom was visible from there were small rounded pebbles, but no algae, no fish, no frogs, no life of any kind. People had never even seen ducks here, although there were several other lakes nearby, and they were always full of waterfowl. And if someone dared to swim in the Black Lake, they would later discover to their bewilderment that afterward their body was covered in streaks of sticky black mud from somewhere unknown, and this in the pristine water. Even the most daring souls after this did not dare return. An inexplicable superstitious fear descended on everyone. Legend had it that the souls of those betrayed, unjustly offended, or deceived in life found peace here. And if such a person remained overnight on the shore of the lake, by morning they would breathe their last, and their soul would be at peace. But the one who had unjustly offended them would begin a period of cruel atonement for the offense inflicted on the deceased. That's why Maria wasn't scared when she went out. At the Black Lake bus stop, she decided that fate itself had given her a clue. Now she knew that she would spend the night in this mysterious place. And from tomorrow, let just retribution begin for all those who had driven her to this. The girl stepped onto the path leading to the lake. Immediately, she saw a small group of gypsies camped under a nearby birch tree. She knew that a large camp had stopped 2 weeks ago not far from here, near the quarry bus stop. Rumor had it that the gypsies were passing through. The camp had been camped in the suburbs for a week and was planning to continue south in a couple of days. Maria walked calmly along the path. The gypsies were sitting right on the grass around a small fire. There were about 10 of them. They were talking about something in their own language. When the girl drew level with them, people turned to look at her, and an old gypsy woman, with almost faded eyes, suddenly said that the girl was about 10 years old. She jumped up and rushed towards Maria. "My grandmother is calling you," the girl demanded, jingling the charms that hung on a green thread around her neck. "Come to her." Maria looked at her indifferently, and she walked on. She heard the sharp, disgruntled voice of an old gypsy woman behind her, followed by quick, loud footsteps. A young man of about 20 caught up with her. He glared at the girl and said, "Don't you understand? Is Shivani calling you?" The man's brows furrowed. "No one has the right to disobey Shivani, otherwise trouble will await you. Go to her." Hearing about the trouble, Masha only grinned. So many troubles had befallen her lately that another one no longer frightened her at all. But there was something in the young gypsy's gaze that made the girl turn back and approach the gypsies sitting on the ground. Old Shuvania nodded her head slightly, and the elderly woman sitting next to her rose from her seat and pointed to him. "Sit," she said commandingly. Maria sat down on the ground next to the old gypsy woman. The old woman looked at the young gypsy woman sitting in the circle, who handed Masha a cup of fragrant tea. "Help yourself," the old gypsy woman said in a raspy voice. Masha took the cup of very black tea, which exuded a strong aroma of berries, from the girl's hands. She began to carefully sip the scalding, delicious drink. Everyone was silent, and Shuni stared at her guest intently and unceremoniously. When the tea was finished, the old woman took the cup from Masha's hands and peered inside. Then, she set the cup on the ground and raised her weak eyes to the girl. "Don't blame anyone for your troubles," Shuni declared. "It's your own fault. You don't know how to distinguish good people from bad. You're already 26 years old. It's time to learn. But what you've planned is a sin. Life is given to every person for happiness, and you will be happy. You will always have time to get to the Black Lake and spend the night on its shore." The old woman fell silent, and the woman who had given up her place next to the gypsy to Masha asked the guest, "Do you understand well what our esteemed Shuvani is telling you?" "Yes, I understand everything," Maria replied. "Then listen further." The woman fixed a piercing gaze on Masha. "Remember every word Shuvani deigns to say to you." Maria saw that everyone sitting on the ground had fixed their attentive gaze on their old gypsy woman. She smiled, but she did not look at Masha anymore. She looked into the flames of a small fire lit in the center of the circle, and suddenly she spoke in a completely different voice. Kind, soft, and, as it seemed to Masha, youthful. "A very great and lasting happiness awaits you. Come to Black Lake in exactly 8 days. Take home whatever you find on the shore. Never give anything you find to anyone. Whatever it costs you, turn back now and go home." Masha quickly calculated the date when she needed to appear at the lake and decided to check with the gypsy woman. In 8 days, that means July 11th. And what time? "Yes, July 11th, confirmed Shuvani, and you can come any time as long as it's light. But better not delay. Come in the morning." Maria herself couldn't understand why her plans had suddenly changed. But her soul became calm. The anxiety and despair did not go away. She stood up and wanted to go to the bus stop, but the old gypsy woman stopped her. "Wait," said Shuvani. "Since the spirits have brought you to us, stay a few more minutes. Everyone thinks that every gypsy can tell fortunes, but that's not true. We have few people who can perform miracles, but they exist. The people you see now by the fire are my students. They can do a lot. And since you're here, I'll give them a little test." The old woman slyly glanced at her fellow tribesmen, and Maria saw that each of them reacted differently. Some tensed, others smiled, and some even fidgeted impatiently. Maria quickly realized that Shuvani was now going to ask her students questions about her life. The girl was surprised by only one thing: the diversity of the people gathered here. There were only 2 men, and then women of different ages, and even a teenage girl. "Come on, Aza." Shuvani looked at the older woman, who gave up her seat to Masha. "Tell me everything you see about her." The gypsy woman's black eyes bored into Maria's. Continuing to stare intently at the girl, the gypsy began. "You married early, out of great love. Your husband is a very good man, but weak. His mother manipulates him. It was she who set your husband up to divorce you. He really wants grandchildren, but you just can't give birth. You wanted to commit a sin today, but the spirits put a barrier in your way. Nothing happens by chance in this life. We saved you. After all, you were going to the lake around which death hovers. You wanted to stay there forever. Night, never to return to the world of the living. But now, everything in your life will change. From now on, everything will be fine for you." Shuvani waved her hand contentedly, silencing the woman. She cast a loving glance at the girl in the manistas, then turned to Masha and explained, "Little Dinara has the gift of healing. She can recognize illnesses and knows how to treat them. She still has a great future ahead of her. She will bring glory to our camp. Come on, girl, see if our guest is doing well with her health." The girl immediately jumped up from her seat and approached Masha. She began to speak rapidly. She has womanly problems. She wasted time while being treated by a bad man. He did not help her. And then she had an operation. Now she will never be able to bear a child. But everything else is fine with her. She is very healthy. Only she cries often because her husband found another woman, and Shishvani saw Masha's eyes fill with tears and did not let the girl finish. But she was pleased with her words. The young healer saw everything correctly and accurately. Suddenly, Shivani's face became very stern. She looked at everyone with a stern look and said, "And now the most difficult part. Who will tell what awaits this woman in the future?" Maria tensed up. She really wanted to hear what her future fate would be. She believed the gypsies gathered here, because everything they said about her was true. The young gypsy who caught up with Masha on the path and led her to the fire nodded his head. Shivani allowed him to speak. The guy remained in his place. He simply looked at Masha and immediately began to speak, addressing her. "If you do everything as Shivani said, you will become very happy. You will have what you dream of, most of all. But just take care and never give anyone what you find on the lake. At first it will be very difficult and scary for you, but you will cope with everything, and every day you will feel happier. Years will pass, and you will be rewarded for your kind heart. You will be 43 years old when you will have everything a person could dream of: a family, a loving husband, a wonderful son. You will be very rich and endlessly loved." Shivani looked at the guy with satisfaction. She saw Maria's future the same way. The gypsy woman turned to Masha and said, "Now you know everything. You can go." Masha warmly thanked the gypsies for the tea and conversation and headed for the tram stop. Along the way, she reflected on how fortune-telling was, after all, a purely feminine craft. The girl and the woman who had spoken about her had been very precise in their words, but the young man had gotten something seriously wrong. She would never be a rich elementary school teacher, and it was unlikely that some millionaire would even look at her with her average appearance. And by talking about a happy life, the young gypsy had greatly exaggerated. What happiness could a woman dream of when her husband leaves her because she can't even bear him a child? Only darkness awaited Maria. The apartment she now lived in belonged to her husband. The little gypsy woman had said correctly. Her husband has another woman, and her husband has already hinted to Masha that she is pregnant. And the elderly gypsy woman was right. Her mother-in-law couldn't forgive Maria for not being able to bear children. And yet, it was she, her husband's mother, who was indirectly to blame for Masha's childlessness. A crash interrupted her sad reflection. The tram pulled up, and Maria boarded the car, whatever that might be. Her brief encounter with the gypsies had inspired hope for a better life. In her current situation, she didn't expect much from life. She just wanted to live quietly. She'd given up on her personal life. Who needed a young, barren wife? She'd now pursue a career at school. Although, what kind of career would that be? She'd never aspired to be a school principal. Maybe she'd change jobs. Masha didn't even notice how she'd reached the right stop. And there she was, at the entrance to her building. Masha rang the doorbell. Silence. She opened the door with her key and saw her mother-in-law's shoes by the threshold. Her heart sank with a bad feeling. For the past 6 months, her mother-in-law had spent nothing but harassment at Maria for ruining her son's life. No, Natalia Petrovna hadn't openly said she dreamed of a new daughter-in-law, but she'd done everything she could to turn Ilya against Masha. Before Maria could enter the room, Natalia Petrovna came out into the hallway. "Sorry I didn't open the door," her mother-in-law said in a weak voice. "I came to see you. And it's empty here." I let myself in with my key. Ilyusha recently gave me your spare key, and then I felt unwell and lay down. My blood pressure must have gone up. Natalia Petrovna, go lie down. I'll take your blood pressure now, Masha said, wishing her husband would come home as soon as possible. Being alone with her mother-in-law had become unbearable for some time now. The blood pressure monitor showed that her mother-in-law's blood pressure was fine. She could have been considered an astronaut. Natalia Petrovna was lying on the sofa in the living room. Masha sat next to her, hoping that her mother-in-law would fall asleep. But she suddenly opened her eyes and asked, "Masha, what's going on with you and Ilyusha?" "He told me he can't bring himself to talk to you honestly. He feels really sorry for you." "I feel the same way, to be honest, but what can I do? There must be children in a family. Now, if Ilyusha didn't want children, that would be a different matter. But it looks like you can't avoid a divorce." "Don't worry, Natalia Petrovna," Masha replied, trying to speak cheerfully and confidently. "I'm already looking for something to rent. As soon as I find one, I'll move out of here right away. I won't drag it out." "It's good, Mashenka, that you understand everything." "That's right. It's obviously your destiny," her mother-in-law said sympathetically. "No one's to blame for everything turning out this way. Natalia Petrovna shouldn't have said that." After her words, Maria snapped. "What do you mean?" "No one's to blame," the girl exclaimed angrily, jumping up from her chair. "But I think it's your fault, Natalia Petrovna. Didn't you forbid me from going to doctors for 6 months and forced me to be treated by your healer friend? Because of this, time was lost, and I had to have an operation. And the doctors told me that this disease is easily treated if you start treatment on time." So that's how the mother-in-law got up from her seat. "Not only have we been dealing with your illness for a whole year, but you also blame me for not being able to give birth. And as for the healer, who knew she was a fraud? The reviews were all positive, and she helped me when my knee was aching. It was not without reason that I recommended her to you." Masha couldn't and didn't want to talk to her mother-in-law anymore. She still stuck to her guns. She didn't feel guilty at all about instilling in Ilya the idea that only a healer could help his wife, and the doctors' treatment of such illnesses was not up to par. Ilya trusted his mother, so he stood by her, forbidding Masha from going to the doctor. He said that it was never too late to go to the clinic, but the doctors would treat her with chemotherapy, while the healer treated exclusively with herbs. But now there was no point in remembering that. What's done is done. Maria needed to think about where she would live in the near future. She went to the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and heard her husband enter the hallway. The girl immediately came out to him. "Ilya, tell me exactly how long I can stay with you. When are you planning to bring your passion here?" "Mashenka, call a spade," her husband answered with a happy smile. "Liza, my fiancée. But she's smart. She agrees to wait as long as it takes you to find a new place. Tell me, will a month suit you?" "You, Liza, are very kind," Masha grinned. 2 weeks will be enough for me. Your mother is there. Treat her to some tea. I'm already looking at an apartment today. They're expecting me there in an hour." "So, bye." Masha quickly grabbed her bag and left the house. She'd made up the apartment thing. She just didn't want to stay with people who suddenly, they became strangers. The girl was overcome with tears of hurt, but she pulled herself together, thought for a moment, and went to her friend. Marina was the only person Masha could cry to, who could support and encourage her. Marina worked as a fitness trainer, was very athletic, muscular, and possessed of a strong masculine character. She could always rein in even her husband, a brash and self-assured police captain, and make him do what she wanted. Luckily for Maria, the man wasn't home, and he and Marina were able to have a heart-to-heart talk. Masha honestly told her friend how she accidentally ended up at the Black Lake bus stop, how she decided to stay there overnight, and especially described in detail her encounter with the gypsies. Marina listened attentively to every word, and after listening to her friend, she said, "You know, I only had a gypsy tell my fortune once. I was 18 at the time. She predicted that I would be able to throw heavy weights and that my husband would be a policeman. And about the children, she also said that my son would become a writer and my daughter would take up some kind of art, either dancing or figure skating." What? Masha was surprised. She predicted a lot of things correctly, about you and your husband, and that you'll have a daughter and a son. True, they're still little, and it's unclear what will become of them, but everything has been accurate up until that moment. That's what I was saying, Marina confirmed. I think there's a lot of truth in what you gypsies said. Do you want me to go to the lake with you on the 11th? It's scary to go alone, isn't it? No, Maria objected. What if we start looking for what we're supposed to find, and you stumble upon it first? Who will get it then? Marina scolded her friend for not asking at all about what she should be looking for, at least in general terms, big or small, what color, where it might be by the water or in the bushes. Masha admitted that she'd thought about this herself on the tram back home, but it was too late. Marina's husband soon returned from his shift, and the hostess invited everyone to dinner. Marina's husband, Artyom, was just as brazen and assertive as his wife. He simply glanced at Masha and asked point blank, "Masha, why are you so sour? If you have any problems, just tell me. I'll always help my beloved wife's best friend." Had something happened? Marina stepped painfully on his foot at the table. She didn't want Masha to start remembering her troubles again. Well, Masha looked at Artyom and quietly said, "Artyom, I'll take you at your word. I'm in such terrible circumstances. I'm afraid I can't do it without your help. I'm deregistering from my husband's apartment, and I don't know if the landlords will register me when I find a place to rent. After all, most often they don't want to register tenants." What a lot to worry about. Artyom was surprised. Not only will I help you with the registration, but I can also find a room in a dorm to rent. The utilities are inexpensive there. Do you want it? Of course I do, the girl rejoiced. I promised Ilya that I would find a place to live and move out in 2 weeks, and if it works out sooner, it will only be better for everyone. Then, that's it, Artyom stated decisively. I have a couple of phone numbers. Tomorrow I'll find out the details at both addresses and call you, but you need to make a decision right away. I'll take a look and tell you right away whether the place is right for me or not. Masha promised. The next morning, Artyom called her and offered 2 options. One cheaper, the other twice as expensive. Maria wasn't exactly strapped for cash. Okay, so they decided to start with a cheap option. It was a 15-square-meter dorm room. When Artyom and Masha walked in, it was immediately clear it wasn't suitable for her. The wallpaper was peeling, cockroaches lurked in the corners and on the ceiling, and huge holes gaped in the linoleum floor. Masha was dejected. Artyom tried his best to calm her while driving her to see another room. This time, they were in luck. The room was almost as big as the first, but everything was perfect. The walls were covered with expensive, fresh wallpaper. The light laminate flooring was immaculate. But what Masha liked most was the presence of the bare essentials. They could move in right away. Everything they needed for life was here. I'll take it, Maria immediately said to the plump woman, the dorm supervisor, who was showing her the room. Excellent, the supervisor smiled. Then come to my office to sign the contract. Masha hadn't even thought the housing issue would be resolved so easily. The dorm was quiet and clean, and it couldn't have been any other way. The supervisor looked very imposing and menacing, although for some reason she was smiling at Masha. The girl signed the lease, paid the deposit, received a receipt, and was given the keys to the room. Maria warned the superintendent that she would be packing her things the next day and moving in the day after. Packing, moving in, tidying up her room, and getting to know the dorm took several days. Masha decided not to use the shared kitchen, but to install a small stove in her room. Only a few days remained until her visit to Black Lake. Masha was dying of impatience. Finally, the day arrived when Masha was supposed to appear at the lake. She could hardly wait until morning and then left. As she got off at the Black Lake stop, she caught several puzzled glances from tram passengers. Today, unlike last time, she was very scared. She immediately regretted refusing Marina's help. Wait, nothing is ever scary. But now, Masha felt as if everything around her was against her. The wind howled eerily in the treetops. The old tree trunks creaked and creaked, though they seemed sturdy and didn't sway at all. And the wind outside wasn't strong enough to cause anything to howl or creak in the treetops. In the tree trunks. As she walked along the path, she didn't encounter a single person. However, she was constantly followed by 2 large ravens. They would overtake her and perch on the road or in the trees ahead, waiting for her to draw level with them. Or they would circle right above her head, and the girl felt as if the birds were about to attack her. But they didn't make a sound, which was especially frightening. Even the grass on either side of the path seemed to come alive. It clung to Maria's legs, preventing her from moving forward, and she had to literally push through it. Last time, everything had been much calmer. Finally, she reached the lake and looked around. Not a soul was around. Everything seemed to have frozen. It was quiet and cemetery-like. She walked slowly along one of the lake's shores, carefully peering at the ground and bushes growing about 5 meters from the water. But there was nothing unusual anywhere that the eye could catch, and Masha didn't know what to look for. She had already walked halfway around the lake, but still hadn't noticed anything. The further she walked, the less hope she had that Shivani's prediction would come true. And suddenly, a faint sound was heard from the bushes. A plaintive squeak. The girl became wary, thinking it was either a kitten or the cub of some forest animal. She was a bit scared. What if it was a forest creature, and its enraged mother was nearby? What if it was a kitten? After all, it wouldn't be able to get out of here on its own. Masha forgot for a moment that she was looking for something very important, and she cautiously peered behind the bushes where the strange plaintive sounds were coming from. There were no animals there. Right on the ground lay a tiny bundle in a blue blanket. Masha didn't yet see what it was, but she already guessed that a baby was wrapped in the blanket. She quickly picked up the bundle and peered inside. Sure enough, there it was. She saw a small, wrinkled face, closed eyes, smacking lips, and heard that same plaintive squeak. She looked around. After all, the baby hadn't come here on its own, but it was still quiet and deserted. Masha picked up the child and began peering deeper into the thicket. Maybe there was someone nearby after all, and the child had simply been abandoned for a minute. As she ran, her fear completely passed. It felt like she was at her own dacha. "People, is anyone here?" She cried out loudly. Masha. She ran along the shore where she'd found the baby, screaming, and suddenly stopped. A thought struck her that perhaps this was what she was meant to find. The thought made her feel sick. She'd thought she'd find something, or a clue about how to move on. But even in her wildest dreams, she couldn't have imagined finding a baby on the lakeshore. The words of the gypsy woman came to mind. She had said she should definitely take whatever she found and never part with it. Domashi didn't want to part with the child. Even if there hadn't been a prophecy, she would have taken it. It was a miracle after all. She had a baby. Even if it wasn't her own, she would formalize everything, adopt it, and raise it. Without looking around, the girl hurried to the bus stop. As she rode, she glanced fearfully at the passengers. She was afraid someone would recognize the baby blanket and want to see the baby. But the passengers dozed indifferently, and no one cared about her. Masha had been living in the dormitory for 2 days already. She had cleaned it up thoroughly, but decided she wouldn't go there with the baby now. She went straight to Marina. She needed advice on what to do next. And right now, the girl had no one closer and more reliable than Marina and her husband Artyom. Luckily, Marina had an evening shift and was home. Seeing her friend with the baby, Marina was surprised. "Whose child is this?" she asked. "Marin, let's not ask questions," Masha answered impatiently. "This is what I found on the lake. Can you imagine? It turns out that the gypsies told me about it. Don't worry, the bastards planted it themselves," Marina said indignantly, peering into the blanket. "They didn't plant anything," Masha objected. "Their tabber left the city a week ago. It's just that the old gypsy woman must have seen that soon they would bring the baby to Black Lake and leave it on the shore. So she said to me, 'You better tell me what to do with it. We need to feed him. Don't babble.'" Marina took the baby from her friend's arms and carried him to the bathroom. "First, we need to bathe him, then wrap him in clean clothes, and then we'll feed him. I have some baby food." There were a couple of jars left from the youngest. Half an hour later, the clean baby in fresh diapers was already greedily devouring the contents of the bottle. Marina held him in her arms, feeding him and frowning. Well, she muttered quietly. "The child is not even a week old, and he has already been betrayed. We need to report him to the police and call an ambulance." "No," Masha resolutely objected. "This is my child, and I will not give him to anyone. And the gypsy woman said that I should never be parted with him. We'll wait for your Artyom, and let him tell us what can be done so as not to break the law and not give the child away anywhere." "Don't get your hopes up, friend," Marina sobered her up. "We don't know what's wrong with the child. Maybe he was kidnapped and his parents are looking for him, or maybe they put him away for a while and will come back and look for him too." Marina hardly believed what she was saying, but she didn't rule out any options. Finally, the baby ate and fell asleep. They put him in the crib, and Marina decided to thoroughly search the blanket and swaddling clothes in which the baby was wrapped. What if the person who left the baby also left a birth certificate, or at least a note? In the folds of the swaddling clothes, they did indeed find something. It was a short note. It read, "I thought this was my ticket to heaven, but it turned out to be a headache. If you need it, take it, and I don't need him, and neither does Daddy." How wonderful. Masha rejoiced. He's nobody's. She found nothing to be happy about. She looked reproachfully at her friend Marina. So small, and already unhappy. "Everything is decided," Masha continued to hope for the best. "We're waiting for Artyom and doing everything as he says, but this child has to be mine." The girls saw that the baby was fast asleep and went to the kitchen to get something to eat. "Listen, Masha," Marina suddenly said, "and maybe now your Ilya will change his mind about getting a divorce and adopting a child?" But Masha shook her head sadly. Natalia Petrovna was categorically against adoption. They had already had such a conversation, and her mother-in-law was categorical on this issue. She wanted only biological grandchildren. Maria told her friend that she, Ilya, would not even say anything about the baby, because Natalia Petrovna might make a big deal out of this. Everything needed to be done quietly and calmly, without drawing unnecessary attention to the situation. Marina agreed. At that moment, the door lock creaked, and Artyom entered the hallway. "Okay, you two talk here," Marina said, looking at her husband with an unusually serious expression. "And me, I'll go pick up the kids at the daycare. I'll also buy some baby food and find out about a milk kitchen. I have some connections." Artyom was very surprised. After seeing his wife off, He sat down across from Masha. The girl told him about the baby and asked her to fill out the paperwork. Masha, are you crazy? Artyom was indignant. Things like this are only done through the police and child protection services. Don't even think about it. Artyom, I want it done legally, the girl pleaded. But you can file a report, or you can do it quietly. Check for yourself whether anyone is looking for him or not. If they are, we'll return him. And if they aren't, why bother with this red tape for months? Artyom continued to dig in his heels. He said that everything had to be registered, verified, and only after verification could they talk about adoption. Maria listened to him and cried bitterly. She understood all this, but she also understood that no child protection agency would give her a child up for adoption. Everything about her was a disaster. She had no place to live, a meager salary, no husband, no support. Would they really give a child to such a mother? Artyom's heart sank. He had 2 children of his own. Only when they were born did he understand what it was like. A real family. He loved his son and daughter dearly and understood how hard it was for Maria to realize she would never have children of her own. He couldn't abandon Masha, whom he'd known for many years, to her fate and promised to do everything possible. When Marina returned, they all decided that Masha would spend the night with them, and the next morning would try to find out the situation in the dorm and find out whether the superintendent would allow her to live with the baby. After everyone had already fallen asleep, Masha remembered the blanket the baby was wrapped in and decided to double-check it. What if she and Marina had missed something? After all, they'd stopped rummaging through these things as soon as they discovered the note. Masha shook the contents of the bag with the baby's things onto the bathroom floor and began to carefully examine them. And suddenly, something fell out of the rags. It was a cheap locket on a simple metal chain. Masha opened it. Inside the locket was a photograph of a young, fair-haired man. She struggled to extract the photo, hoping that maybe there was a name on the back. The man's name, but it was clean. She put the photo back. Her head was buzzing with thoughts, so she didn't think about the man in the photo. She left this riddle to Artyom. He knows better. In the morning, Artyom took a photo of the baby. Marina said again that he was no more than 7-10 days at most because the umbilical cord hadn't healed yet. Artyom carefully examined the locket. He took it with him to take fingerprints and sweat stains, if any were found. He also took Masha's fingerprints. After all, she had touched the locket too. In short, the captain took charge of the matter. Marina stayed with the baby, and Masha went to the dorm. She went straight to the commandant's office. The commandant gave Maria a displeased look and asked sternly, "Well, you haven't even moved in yet, and there are already some problems." What happened? Pale, confused, and frightened, Masha stood before her, shifting from foot to foot. She'd prepared a touching speech, but when she saw this formidable woman before her, all the words flew out of her head. Okay, the commandant chuckled. Stop shaking. She got up from the table, pulled out a chair for Masha, sat down opposite her, and said, "Go ahead, tell me, but be honest and detailed." Masha explained that her husband had kicked her out and that she had a child. She asked the commandant for a probationary period. If anyone complained about her or the child during that time, she would find a new place to live. "Forgive me for not telling you this sooner," Masha said. "I was really afraid you wouldn't let me in, and I simply have nowhere to live." The commandant sat and simply looked at Maria. The girl understood perfectly well that this was a workers' dormitory for single people, and there was no place for families or single mothers. She was almost prepared for refusal when the commandant said, "Well, what can you do? Live here. Can you afford the dormitory?" "I can," Maria replied, wiping tears from her face, not believing her good fortune. "Thank you. I will never forget your kindness. Never. Yes, you all say that. The commandant chuckled. Come on, bring your baby. Now Masha hurried to Marina. She needed to wait for news from Artyom. Finally, he came. Well? She rushed to Masha, asked him. Did you find out anything? Artyom looked very pleased. He leisurely changed his clothes and sat down in front of his friends with a report. He explained that no babies had gone missing in the city or the surrounding area. They hadn't disappeared in the region, or even in neighboring regions. He'd studied all the reports on missing children. Then he returned the locket to Maria, saying that it needed to be preserved as evidence, and explained that, in addition to the car's footprints, only one person's fingerprints were found on it, a woman of about 27 years old. How did you figure out the woman's age? Masha asked, surprised. Not me. The forensics team helped with fingerprints, or more precisely the spaces between the ridges of the palms. Well, that's a long explanation, but there's no mistake. Moreover, they isolated the woman's na, so tomorrow I'll also send a sample of the baby's na to the lab, and we'll be able to find out whether the mother left him there or someone else. I'll need to bring the note blanket and swaddling clothes to the experts. The next day, Artyom continued his investigation and reported that evening that the test had shown the baby and the woman were related, whose fingerprints were found on the clothes and the locket. Moreover, no other biological traces were found anywhere, leading to the conclusion that the baby was abandoned on the lakeshore by its wayward mother. But the photograph gave him no clue. The facial recognition system couldn't identify the person. Artyom assumed he was dead, or someone who didn't live in our country. Marina pestered her husband. Artyom, what should we do next? I asked Ekaterina Markovna to see the baby today. Remember, she's our children's pediatrician? I told her a friend left him for 2 days. What did the pediatrician say? Masha froze. Is everything okay? Well, yes, Marina replied. She said the boy was strong and good, and his belly button was drying up nicely, but scolded you for being a bad mother. Marina laughed and added, the doctor said you can't leave such little ones with strange women. Girls, I feel like you're trying to persuade me to do the wrong thing, Artyom said. What are you trying to achieve? It's not like you want me to make you a birth certificate. Marina began to gently remind her husband that he has connections in the Legislative Assembly. And anyway, he's so strong, powerful, and smart. Couldn't he get his hands on some piece of paper? Masha, meanwhile, only looked at Artyom pleadingly. She didn't know what words to use to persuade him. Okay, girls. Artyom softened. Consider it convinced. I'm not promising, but I'll try. Artyom went to dinner, and Marina picked up a piece of paper and a pen and grilled her friend. She asked what last name, first name, and patronymic Masha would give her son, and what date of birth he should enter. All this was necessary for the birth certificate. The friends came up with a name for the boy together and named him Artyom in honor of their chief assistant. Masha gave him her patronymic, and the date of birth was the day he was found in the lake. Artyom didn't throw words to the wind. He didn't say how much it cost him, but he managed to get a birth certificate. 5 years passed. Masha and Artyom lived in the same dorm room. They often visited Marina and Artyom, and they were amazed at how well Masha managed to cope with her maternal responsibilities. Artyom Koros was strong. He was healthy and never sick, but Masha's friends were most amazed by the boy's intelligence. Today was the birthday of Marina and Artyom's daughter. The girl was 2 years older than Artyomka. She turned 7. And in the fall, she was getting ready to start 1st grade. While the women were setting the table in the living room, Artyom entertained the children. He gave them markers and suggested they draw. Artyomka quickly began to draw a family of cats. Artyomka, take the marker in your right hand. Adult Artyom decided to correct the boy. But the little boy smiled at the man and said, Not at all. I'm ambidextrous. Adult Artyom knew what ambidexterity was, but pretended he'd never heard the word. He asked in surprise, "What is that?" "No. Who?" Artyomka corrected. "It's a person who can use both hands well. He doesn't care whether it's his left or his right. He does everything perfectly. Like Leonardo da Vinci." "He was ambidextrous, too, you know about Leonardo da Vinci?" asked the adult Artyom, surprised. His 7-year-old daughter knew nothing about the genius of all time. "Well, who doesn't know about da Vinci?" Artyom asked, surprised. A genius who knew mathematics well, could draw, and invent all sorts of extraordinary things. He invented both an airplane and a parachute, and there's no need to go into detail. The more the man talked to the boy, the more amazed he was by his knowledge and storytelling skills. All of this was clearly beyond the age of a 5-year-old. As they sat at the table celebrating the girl's birthday, adult Artyom quietly turned to Masha. "Masha, you know, I think your son has some extraordinary parents. He's so smart for a 5-year-old." "Do you know how much I spend with him?" Masha exclaimed. "We never sit at home with him. I drag him to exhibitions, then around town. I explain everything to him, tell him stories, read to him." Then Marina intervened, saying that this was bad, and that her friend was depriving her little one of a childhood, which Masha couldn't agree with, because her son went to the pool and was already confident on the ice, and loved skating. "Masha, didn't he ask you where his dad was?" "He did," Maria replied. "I told him that his dad divorced me before he was born and said he didn't have I need neither my son nor me. Now Dad lives in another country, and he has another family. It's not nice to lie," Marina admonished her friend, gobbling up her salad. "If I were you, I'd tell him that you'll tell him about Dad when he's 15. Or 18. "You can say that too," Masha disagreed. "I'll never tell him that he's not my biological father. What if he suddenly wants to find his biological parents? I couldn't survive that." Masha was very close to her son. She was the most important person in his life. The boy seemed to sense how much he owed her, and was simply the perfect son, obedient, calm, and independent. Well, as for intellect, Maria herself noticed that her Artyomka was not only ahead of his peers in development, but could sometimes even give adults a talk. He grasped new knowledge on the fly, and if you add to this his phenomenal memory, the boy's future looked very promising. Masha puzzled over what he could become when he grew up. Everything came to him surprisingly easily. Artyomka turned 16. Maria hadn't worked at a school for a long time. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job at a large commercial firm as a secretary to the director. The salary was higher, and the workday was strictly regulated. She still spent a lot of time with her son. He was her main concern and her main entertainment. Artyomka was very interesting, and Masha could listen to him for hours. However, Artyomka had almost no time for conversation. He was constantly participating in various competitions. Above his desk in their cramped dorm room hung several gold and silver medals earned at international school competitions, and under them lay a stack of certificates from his school. When her son was on one of his trips, Masha loved to look through all these things, and dreaded the thought that soon her son would become an adult and might want to find his father. After all, Masha didn't want to lie to him, but she also couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth. She didn't know what to do in such a situation, but chance came to her rescue. She was at work when Artyomka returned from another Olympics in the neighboring region. On the way, he ran into something with his sneaker, a metal pole sticking out of the ground. The sole immediately tore, and it was impossible to fix the shoe. He called his mother at work, reported his arrival, and told her about his sneaker problem. He asked if they had money for a new pair. Masha explained to her son that she had put the money in a jewelry box, told him where it was, and allowed him to take the necessary amount. Artyom rarely looked in that box. It had 2 compartments. One was where his mother kept her jewelry, and the other held some papers and money. Artyom was uninterested in any of this. But when he saw his mother's jewelry this time, he suddenly felt very sad. He remembered the beautiful female teachers he had seen at the Olympics. Not only were they all well-dressed and beautifully coiffed, but their hands and necks were adorned with expensive rings and necklaces, while his mother had only cheap jewelry. The boy wondered if perhaps there were some gold jewelry somewhere at the bottom of the box. He began carefully pulling cheap plastic beads and bracelets out of the box and onto the table. Finally, he reached the bottom. There was no gold there. True, his mother was wearing gold earrings, a gold chain with a pendant, but she always had them. And at the bottom there was not a single gold jewelry, but some kind of metal medallion on a chain. Artyomka took it, accidentally pressed a tiny button, and the medallion opened with a jingle. Inside, the boy saw a photo, looked, and was amazed. The man with the photo looked very much like him. The thought flashed. Could it be his father? He could hardly wait for his mother to return from work. "Hello, my dear." His mother hugged him. "How I missed you. You're such a good boy. Your team took first place again. Congratulations." Suddenly, Maria noticed that her son was inattentively listening to her. "Did you buy the sneakers?" she asked, thinking that her son had forgotten the money. "Mom, I've been waiting for you," the boy answered. "I want us to go together. We can talk at the same time." Maria tensed up. "Okay, let's go." "What do you want to talk about?" The boy was silent, and when they left the entrance, he pulled a medallion out of his pocket and opened it. "Mom, tell me. Who is this?" Maria barely made it to the bench, which was 3 steps away from them, and sank heavily onto it. She had long ago forgotten about this. The locket and the photo inside. Masha had been working as a secretary for a reputable company for several years, and wearing cheap jewelry there was unacceptable. So she hadn't looked in the compartment of the box where the plastic jewelry was kept, and she had completely forgotten about the locket. Otherwise, she would have hidden it more securely from her son. But now, Artyom was sitting next to her, waiting for an answer. Maria opened the locket and stared at the photo. Only now did she realize that the man in the photo and her grown son looked very similar. "Okay," Maria said, feeling her whole body go numb. Even her lips refused to obey her. "I'll tell you everything." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Mom, what's wrong?" Artyom was afraid for his beloved mother. "If you don't want to, don't tell me." "I just asked." But Maria was already terrified by her terrible secret, and she decided the time had come to confess everything to her son. Somehow, having overcome her tears, she told Artyom, in a coherent and brutally honest manner, how she came into possession of the medallion. She concluded her difficult confession with these words. Uncle Artyom spent several years tracking reports of children and searching databases for the person with the photo, but it yielded no results. So now you know everything. If you want to find your real parents, I don't mind. They might be rich, and you'll be better off with them than with me. She stood up and, hunched over, walked back home. "Mom, what are you doing?" Artyom was indignant. "I don't need any rich parents. I only need you. And we'll be rich soon anyway. Firstly, we were given 100,000 each in stipends. They're supposed to be transferred into our account tomorrow. And secondly, the guys and I found a great part-time job for the holidays. They promised to pay well, too." Maria walked and cried. But now, she was glad that her son hadn't rushed off to look for his biological parents. He decided to stay with her. The older Artyom got, the more Maria became convinced that his biological parents were talented, gifted people. After all, even though she tried her best for her son, her unnatural predisposition wouldn't have been enough to mold him into such a promising brainiac. "That's it, Mom. Get going," she said. Artyomka said, "We're going to get sneakers. We'll also stop by and buy something tasty. I took more money from the box toward my bonus tomorrow. Maria felt a long-standing weight lift from her soul. If she'd known her son would react this way to the story of their meeting at Black Lake, she would have told him everything much sooner. Artyom didn't ask about the man in the photo anymore, and didn't even mention her story about finding him at the lake. Maria calmed down, but Artyom wasn't one to stop halfway. He decided, without his mother's knowledge, to conduct his own investigation and find out who the man in the photo was. He found out quite quickly. He was a scientist, a renowned anthropologist in his circles. True, he had long since left the department and was pursuing his studies as an amateur. He owned a large collection of historical and magical artifacts. He earned his living through business, owning a chain of fitness clubs under his own brand. His name was Andrei Vitalyevich Bondarev. He lived in the same city as the boy and his mother. Artyom's many talents included excellent computer skills. This allowed him to quickly gather all the information about Bondarev. The boy assumed he was his father. Now he needed to find out who his biological mother was. This was more difficult. It turned out Bondarev had been married twice, but both times he quickly divorced his wives, always for the same reason. While he was on expeditions, both wives cheated on him. Bondarev was present on several social media platforms, but his pages were very sparse in information, so Artyom began browsing the pages of people who had appeared on Bondarev's social media at least once. With great difficulty, he managed to identify 3 women with whom the man had communicated 17 years ago. The women were easier. Their pages were filled with numerous effeminate photos. Looking at them, Artyom winced. He didn't want any of these unintellectual women to be his mother. He didn't understand at all how a venerable scientist could get involved with such people. Women. But on the pages of 2 women, he found Bondarev's photo. It then took the boy almost another month of persistent work to find the contact information of the woman he believed to be his mother. She fit the role more than anyone else Bondarev knew. Artyom was certain he had identified his biological parents. Now all that was left was to confirm this with DNA testing. That morning Maria woke up and couldn't believe her eyes. Artyom was standing by her bed, but she barely recognized him. His beautiful, wavy blonde hair was a poisonous green today. It made her son's face look sickly pale. "This color doesn't suit you," his upset mother said. "Why are you green? If you wanted to dye your hair, you could have dyed it black or red. You could even go blonde. Anything is better than a green cucumber." Artyomka smiled. "Don't worry, Mom. This dye washes out quickly. I just wanted to try it. I went out to run some errands. I'll be back in the evening. If anything happens, call me." The boy kissed his mother on the cheek and left the room. He told the truth. He went out to run some errands. And he had a lot of errands today. Important. He was going to meet his father. At least, he thought Bondarev was his father. They were too much alike. The boy found a perfect excuse to meet, asking to see one of the historical artifacts in Bondarev's collection, saying he was going to take part in the Olympics and was simply curious to experience that era firsthand through an artifact. Bondarev was very surprised to learn that such a young man was interested in his collection and happily invited him to her place. Andrei Vitalyevich lived outside the city, in a beautiful snow-white mansion. Artyom had never been in such an expensive home. He had seen expensive hotels when he went to the Olympics, and he had seen the expensive halls of various educational and scientific institutions where the Olympics were held. But there were no wealthy people among his friends and acquaintances, so the luxury of Bondarev's house weighed on him. "Why do you need such a big house?" the owner of the mansion asked the boy, not hiding his hostility, as he led him up the stairs with their open-work railings and an intricate passage to the room where his collection was kept. "What do you have, a huge family?" "No," Bondarev smiled. "I just like comfort. I know how to earn money. and I'm not used to denying myself little things. Where are you, and who do you live with? I live with my mother, Artyom answered. We have a room in a dorm. I was born and raised there. And you know, my mother and I have enough. Although my mother deserves better conditions. I plan to start working after school, and will definitely earn enough for her to have an apartment. Bondarev said that he was very interested in the boy's social media pages. He asked why he didn't have a single photo of himself there, to which Artyom replied that he didn't like having his photos taken. Although in fact, before writing to Bondarev, he simply deleted his photos from social media so that Andrei Vitalyevich wouldn't be embarrassed by their external resemblance. For the same reason, he dyed his hair green. Well, as for an apartment for your mother, Bondarev said, I'm sure you can earn enough for it in about 10 years. I read about your success at the Olympics. I think you have a bright future. They finally reached the collection, and Artyomka began examining it with interest. What was there? He asked questions, and Andrei Vitalyevich eagerly and captivatingly told him about whatever interested the boy. The conversation was so captivating that they didn't even think about the time. An elderly housekeeper interrupted them. She entered the room and said sternly, Andrei Vitalyevich, it's high time you had dinner. Bondarev glanced at his watch and caught himself. He had been keeping to a schedule and was already half an hour late for dinner. The man invited his guest to dine with him. The two of them sat at a large table set with beautiful cutlery and dishes unfamiliar to Artyom, and a waiter stood nearby to change their plates promptly. Finally, dinner was over, and a lot of food remained untouched. Artyom looked cheekily at the host and asked, Would you mind if I take some pastries for my mother? Bondarev was embarrassed. Sorry, I should have suggested you take something with you to treat your mother. So, are you ready to look at the collection again? I would love to, but it's late. Mom will worry. Maybe another time. Of course. As soon as when you're ready, call me. I'll definitely make time for you. I had no idea that people your age could be so well-rounded and interesting. That's how my mother raised me, Artyom said, and Bondarev detected a clear challenge in his words. The man looked at him carefully and suggested that the boy bring his mother with him on his next visit. The man was interested to see the woman who had managed to single-handedly raise a genius. The maid handed the boy a box of pastries for his mother, and the master walked the guest to the gates of the mansion. While Artyom was returning home, a brilliant plan formed in his ingenious head. He would introduce his mother to the supposed father. Although, why suppose it? By the time he and his mother were ready to visit, and perhaps the DNA test would already be ready. Perhaps it was for nothing that Artyom had stolen Bondarev's used fork from the table as they were leaving the dining room after dinner. The most interesting and funny thing is that the elderly housekeeper saw him wrap the fork in a bag and put it in his pocket. But for some reason she didn't say anything to anyone. Artyom wasn't afraid that his mother would recognize Bondarev as the man with the photograph. He looked young in the locket, but now he's matured. It's obvious he works out at his own gyms, is well-toned, and not a gram of excess weight is visible. He's also visibly older. While the boy was driving home, his plan finally took shape. Mom, this is a hotel for you from an interesting person, Artyom said, placing the box on the kitchen table and opening it. Maria approached and looked at its contents with a smile. Where did such riches come from? These are very expensive pastries. I've only had them 2 or 3 times in my life. Well, now eat your fill, put the kettle on, wash your hands, and then tell you where I was today. Maria listened with interest to her son's story, still amazed that such a prominent man had invited him to visit. When the boy finished, he stunned his mother by informing her that Bondarev now expected Artyom to bring his mother to visit him. What's that for? Maria was amazed. I don't understand anything about this. I won't find it interesting there. Mom, you're wrong. There's a lot to see there. And Andrei Vitalyevich himself is a very interesting person. I beg you, let's go together. I want you to come with me." Maria sighed and nodded her head in agreement. She couldn't refuse her beloved son anything. 2 weeks later, Artyom called Bondarev, and he invited them to visit the following Saturday. He welcomed Artyom with open arms, like an old friend, and looked at Maria with great interest, trying to understand what was so unique and unusual about her that allowed him to raise his son so well. But if Artyom was depressingly impressed by Bondarev's mansion, Maria was delighted. For her, the mansion was something of a museum. It was filled with paintings by old masters, interesting modern gadgets, and the interior design was like a work of art. Everything was beautiful, refined, and sophisticated. "You have very good taste," Maria praised the owner. "Or did designers arrange all this for you?" "Oh, what are you saying?" Bondarev asked, offended. "Every single thing was purchased by me personally. I like to arrange my home myself." Soon the owner brought the guests into the room where the collection was displayed, and Maria realized there was no place for her there. All this didn't suit her. She was interested. Bondarev invited the housekeeper and instructed her to entertain his guest and show him around the mansion and yard. There was plenty to see. The good-natured, talkative housekeeper began to carry out her master's orders with pleasure. She led Masha from one room to another, telling her which country her master had brought her this or that painting, figurine, or antique book. Finally, they found themselves in Bondarev's study. The housekeeper warned her not to touch anything there. 2 portraits hung above the desk. One was of the mansion's owner. It was clear that the painting had been recently completed. Maria glanced at the second painting and felt ill. She sank into the master's chair and asked the housekeeper in a hoarse voice, "Who is this?" "Well, that's Andrei Vitalyevich, only in his youth," the woman explained, horrified to realize that her guest was about to faint. And indeed, he did. Maria closed her eyes and lost consciousness. A housekeeper shook her awake, but Masha didn't regain consciousness. The frightened woman rushed for the first aid kit and began calling for help from one of the staff. Soon, 5 people gathered around Maria, but Masha still hadn't regained consciousness. "We need to call an ambulance and tell the owner," the cook said decisively, having come running at the sound of screams and seeing the confused women. One of them ran after the owner, while the others began to carry Maria to the sofa. As soon as they had her settled, Bondarev and Artyom ran into the office. "Mom, what's wrong?" The boy rushed to his mother, in fear. But his mother didn't move. An ambulance soon arrived. The doctor quickly revived the woman and told her she was having a heart attack. Artyom burst into tears. He walked beside his mother as she was carried out on a stretcher, saying, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I didn't know it would end like this. Please forgive me. Let's go to my car," Bondarev commanded the boy. "We'll follow the ambulance, find out which hospital your mother is being taken to. And maybe we need to buy something. We'll buy it right away." At the hospital, Maria's condition was quickly brought back to normal, and they said she'd have to stay with them for about 2 weeks. Heart problems are no joke. Bondarev offered Artyom to stay with him for the time being. He felt guilty that something like this had happened to the boy's mother in his house. Artyom agreed. When they returned home, it was already late. The boy was fed dinner and sent to sleep in a separate bedroom. Bondarev went to the housekeeper's house to find out how it happened that a healthy, flourishing woman suddenly fainted and even had a heart attack. "It's no accident," the elderly woman stated confidently. "Masha was always in a good mood, but when she saw your portrait in the office, she suddenly felt ill. I thought she recognized you in the portrait. Don't you remember her?" "I have a professional memory," the man said confidently. "If I had ever met her, I would have recognized her. But no matter, I'll talk to Artyom tomorrow. Maybe he can explain something." The boy woke up early in the morning and got ready to go to his mother at the hospital. The housekeeper approached him and said, "Don't rush. Andrei Vitalyevich will wake up and take you to your mother's in the car." "I don't need his car," Artyom replied angrily. "And I don't need him either. He's nothing but trouble." The boy left the house determinedly and took the bus to his mother. She was already feeling better. She said she wouldn't stay there for 2 weeks, 2 or 3 days at most, and then she'd go home. She couldn't leave her son alone. Artyom didn't say a word about Bondarev. Today he treated him much worse than yesterday. Early that morning, the DNA results arrived in Artyom's email, confirming that the man was his biological father. Artyom himself didn't expect this news to enrage him, that he'd see Bondarev as an enemy, a traitor. But it did. Besides, Mom had suffered because of Bondarev. "Mom, get well soon, and I'll clean up the house perfectly and wait for you. But I'll come see you too. Then I'll pick you up from the hospital and we'll go home together." Maria didn't know how her fainting spell in Bondarev's house had ended, and she really hoped Artyom hadn't realized that the man could be his father. She decided she would never be the first to mention his name again. She desperately wanted her son to forget him too, and that would have happened if Bondarev himself hadn't decided to sort things out personally. He didn't dare disturb the sick woman, but he wanted to engage Artyom in a frank conversation. So, through some contacts at the police, he quickly obtained the address of their dorm room and knocked on the door that evening. Artyom opened the door, saw her, frowned, but invited him in. Bondarev glanced around the modest dwelling, saw a stack of Artyom's medals hanging above the table, and smiled approvingly. "So, shall we talk?" he asked amiably. "Maybe you could explain to me why Mom fainted? What do you mean by your words to my housekeeper? I don't understand anything." "We'll talk," Artyom said decisively. "But only if you promise that this will be the first and last time, and that you will never disturb my mother again." "I promise," the man replied with a relaxed smile. "I really hoped that you wouldn't recognize me, and that Mom wouldn't recognize you. But it didn't work out that way. Mom recognized your portrait from your youth. We have the same one at home." Artyom took out the medallion and handed it to Bondarev. He opened it and saw his photo. The man was terribly surprised and asked where he got it. Then Artyom explained in detail how almost 17 years ago, his mother found him at Black Lake, and this medallion and a note were in the baby's swaddling clothes. Bondarev was stunned by what he heard. He asked when the boy was born and said that Artyom could not be his son. The year before his birth, he was very busy with work and had no women who could get pregnant with his child. The boy handed him the DNA test results. "So that's why you needed my fork," Bondarev guessed. "The housekeeper told me how you hid it." The man reread the test results for the 100th time and still couldn't believe it was true. And suddenly, he slapped his forehead. He remembered. "I had once had a chance encounter. The girl threw herself into my arms. I don't even really remember her. I remember that she called me somewhere around 5 or 6 months pregnant and said that she was expecting my child." Bondarev said he didn't believe her, since they'd only spent 1 night together, but just in case, he'd done some research and gotten her contact information. It turned out that the girl had several regular boyfriends at the time, lovers. When the child was born, she began calling all her lovers one by one, and when she called him, he expressed doubt that he was the father of the child, to which the girl laughed and said, "I think so too. But I still decided to call you. You're the richest of my men. I hoped you'd believe me." Bondarev said that the girl never called him again and never appeared in his life. The man couldn't get over the news that he could have a son. He couldn't believe it. At the same time, he really wanted this smart, well-mannered guy to be his son. "I'll do one more test," Bondarev said, "and then I'll decide everything. Give me something with your biological material on it. Artyom gave him his toothbrush and sternly reminded him, "You promised never to bother my mother again, and you promised that we wouldn't have any more conversations. Everything is clear to me. Mom and I were fine until I did something stupid and found you. So this is our last meeting." The boy looked at his guest very seriously, making it clear that the conversation was over. He had no choice but to leave. 3 days later, Maria returned home to her dorm room. Her son greeted her with the expensive pastries she loved so much. He had earned a good amount of money during these days, fulfilling customer orders on the computer, creating programs for a small business with the proceeds, and delighting his mother. "It's so nice to be home," Maria said, looking around her modest home. 2 weeks passed, and Bondarev received the test results. They were identical to the one his son had shown him. The man was again shocked. He couldn't believe he had such a wonderful son, and at the same time, he understood that this man's trust had to be earned, just like his mother's. It took Bondarev 2 long years to achieve this, and only because Maria convinced her son to accept Bondarev as a father did the now grown man agree, not so much for himself, but for his mother's sake. Over the past 2 years, Maria had become very close to Bondarev, and he proposed. The family now lived in Bondarev's spacious mansion, and when Maria had completely settled in there and became a full-fledged mistress, having access to all of her husband's accounts, she thanked everyone who helped her when she had absolutely no hope. She gave the strict woman, the dorm's superintendent, vouchers to an expensive resort for the whole family. She simply gave Marina and Artyom money so they could finally move from their small 2-room apartment to a larger 3-room apartment in a good neighborhood. She also spoke fondly of the Roma, who saved her from a rash decision and gave her hope for happiness, which she did indeed experience.